The living room exists in that strange twilight hour when the world outside has gone quiet, but sleep hasn't quite claimed you yet. The television screen glows pale blue, frozen on a game menu that neither of us bothered to navigate away from hours ago. The controller lies forgotten on the coffee table, its battery light blinking red in the dim space between us. I can feel the weight of Damien beside me on the couch, his presence both familiar and electric in ways I've learned not to examine too closely. We've been friends long enough that sharing this cramped space should feel natural, unremarkable. But tonight, like so many nights recently, the air seems thicker somehow, charged with something I don't have words for, something that makes my chest tight and my thoughts scatter when he shifts closer. The couch is too small for two grown men to lie comfortably, but Damien doesn't seem concerned with comfort. He stretches out with the easy confidence he brings to everything, claiming space the way he always has, as if the world should simply rearrange itself around him. And maybe it does. Maybe I do. His shoulder presses against mine as he adjusts his position, and I feel that familiar jolt of awareness that I've become expert at ignoring, or trying to ignore. The heat of his body seeps through our shirts, and I tell myself it means nothing. Friends touch. Friends share space. This is normal, ordinary, nothing worth the way my pulse quickens or the way I hold my breath when he moves. But then Damien turns toward me, and in the blue-tinged darkness, I can see something in his expression that makes my stomach flip. His eyes are heavy-lidded, whether from exhaustion or something else entirely. And when he speaks, his voice carries a weight that wasn't there during our earlier conversation about nothing important. He says my name softly, like he's testing how it sounds in this quiet space. Elias. The way he draws out the syllables makes something flutter behind my ribs, dangerous and hopeful and terrifying all at once. I don't trust myself to speak, so I just look at him, waiting. The silence stretches between us, filled with all the things we've never said, all the moments like this one that we've pretended didn't mean anything. Then Damien shifts again, closer this time, and I can smell his cologne mixed with something warmer, more distinctly him. His knee brushes against mine, and neither of us moves away. The contact is small, insignificant to anyone watching, but it feels enormous in the context of everything we've been carefully not acknowledging. He laughs then, but it's not his usual easy laughter. This sound is different, nervous maybe, or uncertain. It's the kind of laugh that comes before you say something you can't take back. If this is anything, he whispers, his breath ghosting across the space between us, we should keep it casual. Nothing complicated. The words hit me like cold water, even though part of me was expecting them. Especially because part of me was expecting them. This is Damien's way, I realize. He builds walls even as he tears them down, offers connection while simultaneously limiting it. The word casual sits heavy in the air between us, loaded with implications and escape routes. I nod because what else can I do? I nod and try to ignore the way my chest aches at the qualification, at the way he needs to put boundaries around whatever this is before it's even begun. I've always been the careful one, the one who thinks too much, but in this moment I want to be reckless. I want to ask him what he means by anything. I want to ask him what casual looks like when your heart is already involved. But I don't ask any of those things. Instead, I agree with a small movement of my head, and I watch something like relief flicker across his face. Or maybe it's disappointment. In this light, it's impossible to tell the difference. The conversation moves on to safer topics after that. Damien tells me about his job, about some girl from his marketing class who keeps texting him, about his plans for the weekend. Normal things, friend things. But his voice sounds different now, more deliberate, like he's working harder to keep things light. I listen and respond at appropriate intervals, but I'm hyper-aware of every point where our bodies connect. His elbow against my ribs, his ankle hooked over mine, the way his thumb traces absent patterns on the couch cushion, just inches from my thigh. Each touch feels both innocent and loaded, and I find myself cataloging them like evidence of something I'm not allowed to name. As the night wears on, our conversation grows quieter, more sporadic. Damien's responses come slower, punctuated by longer pauses, and I can tell he's fighting sleep. You should go home. He has an early class tomorrow. A life to return to that doesn't include falling asleep on my couch. But he makes no move to leave, and I don't suggest it. Instead, I watch as his eyelids grow heavier, as his breathing begins to slow and deepen. He's beautiful like this, unguarded in a way he never allows himself to be when he's fully awake. The harsh lines of his jaw soften, and his mouth loses that careful control he maintains during our daylight conversations. I should probably move, create some distance, preserve the casual nature he insisted on. But I find myself frozen, unwilling to disturb this moment or the way it feels to have him so close, so undefended. When Damien finally gives in to sleep, he doesn't move away. Instead, he shifts closer, and I feel his face settle against the curve of my neck. His breath is warm against my skin, steady and deep, and the intimacy of it makes my throat close up with emotion I'm not supposed to be feeling. This is casual, I tell myself. This is just two friends sharing space. Nothing more complicated than proximity and exhaustion. But as I lie there in the blue-tinged darkness, feeling the weight of Damien's trust in the way he sleeps pressed against me, I know I'm lying to myself. Casual has never felt so heavy. It's never carried the weight of possibility and denial in equal measure. It's never made my chest ache with want and fear and the terrible knowledge that some lines, once crossed, change everything that comes after. I stare at the ceiling and listen to Damien breathe, and I understand with perfect clarity that casual is just another word for the thing we're too afraid to call by its real name. I've always been the quiet one, the observer, the friend who remembers which coffee shop you mentioned liking 3 months ago, who notices when you change your hair or when something's bothering you even before you realize it yourself. Growing up, I learned to read the room before I entered it, to gauge the temperature of a conversation before adding my voice to it. Maybe it comes from being different in ways I couldn't name as a child, this instinct to watch and listen and file away the small details that matter. In our friend group, I'm the one people come to at 3 in the morning when everything falls apart. I'm a designated driver, the secret keeper, the shoulder to cry on. I've held hair back while friends threw up, listened to confessions that weren't mine to hear, offered my couch to anyone who needed somewhere safe to crash. Being needed has always felt like enough, like my own form of belonging. But Damien is different. With Damien, I've never been just the quiet friend on the periphery. He noticed me first, actually. Sophomore year of college, in a lecture hall packed with 200 students, somehow he picked me out of the crowd. I was sitting in my usual spot, 3 rows from the back, taking careful notes while everyone around me scrolled through their phones or dozed. After class, he appeared at my elbow as if materializing from thin air. "You actually listen to Professor Martinez," he said, grinning in that way that would become so familiar. "That's either really admirable or completely insane." I told him I thought it might be both, and he laughed like I'd said the funniest thing he'd ever heard. From that day forward, we were inseparable. Damien is everything I'm not. Where I observe, he performs. Where I whisper, he announces. He's the center of every party, the one with endless stories that get more elaborate with each telling. People are drawn to him the way plants turn towards sunlight, unconsciously and completely. He has this gift for making everyone feel like they're the most interesting person in the room, at least while they're talking to him. With girls, he's magnetic in a way that should make me jealous, but somehow doesn't. I've watched him charm baristas and cashiers and classmates with equal ease, seeing the way their faces light up when he remembers their names or asks about their day. He collects phone numbers like souvenirs, texts that start flirty and fade into casual friendship when a novelty wears off. I know all their names. Sarah from his statistics class, who baked him cookies when he was stressed about midterms. Jessica, who works at the campus bookstore and always holds the textbooks he needs behind the counter. Emma, who he took to dinner twice before deciding they were better as friends. The list goes on, a parade of girls who see in Damien exactly what everyone sees, someone charming and available and safely, obviously straight. Everyone knows this about him. It's part of his identity, as fundamental as his major or his hometown or his terrible taste in action movies. Damien dates girls, sleeps with girls, talks about girls with the easy confidence of someone who has never questioned what he wants or who he's supposed to want. I know this too, have always known it. But my heart has never been particularly good at listening to logic. Our friendship has always been physical in small ways that feel significant only to me. Damien is tactile by nature, the type of person who expresses affection through touch without thinking about it. A hand on my shoulder when he's making a point. His legs thrown over mine when we're sprawled across his bed watching movies. The way he'll absently play with my hair when I'm lying with my head in his lap. His attention focused on whatever game he's playing on his phone. To him, it's casual contact, meaningless as breathing. The same way he hugs his other friends, rough and brief and completely without subtext. But when Damien touches me, something electric runs beneath my skin, a current I've learned to hide, so well I almost believe I've stopped feeling it. Almost. Lately, though, something has changed. The touches linger longer than they used to. When we watch movies, he gravitates toward me on the couch, our bodies finding reasons to connect that feel less accidental than they once did. Sometimes I catch him watching me with an expression I can't quite read, something thoughtful and uncertain flickering across his features before he looks away. Last month, during one of our marathon study sessions, I fell asleep with my head on his shoulder. When I woke up, his cheek was resting against my hair, and his arm was wrapped around me like he was holding me in place. For a moment, in that hazy space between sleep and waking, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Then reality crashed back, and I pulled away so quickly I nearly fell off the chair. Damien rubbed his eyes and made some joke about my shoulder being more comfortable than his pillow, but there was something different in his voice, something careful and measured that hadn't been there before. We never talked about that moment. But it hangs between us now like a question neither of us is brave enough to ask. Every casual touch since then feels weighted with possibility, every shared glance loaded with meaning I might be imagining. Because this is Damien, my straight friend Damien, who talks about girls and dates girls and has never given me any real reason to hope for something more than friendship. Except for the way he looks at me sometimes, like he's trying to figure out a puzzle he didn't know he was solving. Except for the way he stays later than he used to, finds excuses to crash on my couch instead of going home to his own bed. Except for last night, when he whispered about keeping things casual while his face pressed against my neck like he was trying to memorize the taste of my skin. It happens on a Thursday night in late October, when the first real cold snap has settled over campus and the windows fog with our breath when we talk too close to the glass. We've been in my apartment for hours, ostensibly studying for midterms, but really just existing in that comfortable space we've carved out together over the past 3 years. The coffee table is littered with the remnants of our evening. Textbooks, splayed open to chapters neither of us has actually read, highlighters with their caps missing, my laptop balanced precariously on a stack of notebooks. 2 empty beer bottles sit sweating rings into my organic chemistry notes, and a third bottle dangles forgotten from Damien's fingers as he sprawls across the other end of the couch. We're not drunk, not really, just loose enough around the edges that the careful boundaries we usually maintain feel less essential, more negotiable. The alcohol sits warm in my stomach, making everything softer and more possible than it felt an hour ago. Damien has been quieter tonight than usual. His typical stream of stories and observations reduced to thoughtful silences punctuated by the occasional comment about whatever documentary is playing unwatched on my television. Something about ocean conservation, narrated by a voice so soothing it's practically designed to put you to sleep. I've been stealing glances at him all evening, trying to decode the expression on his face. He looks pensive, almost troubled, his usual easy confidence replaced by something more uncertain. When he speaks, it's to the ceiling rather than to me, as if the words are easier to say when he doesn't have to meet my eyes. He says his voice casual in that particular way that means he's about to say something significant. I was thinking about what Marcus said at lunch today. Marcus is his roommate, a philosophy major who speaks exclusively in abstractions and spends most of his time debating the nature of reality with anyone willing to engage. I have no idea what specific comment Damien is referring to, but I make an encouraging sound and wait for him to continue. About how most people never really know themselves, he goes on, rolling the beer bottle between his palms. How we spend so much time performing who we think we're supposed to be that we never figure out who we actually are. The documentary drones on in the background, something about coral reefs and rising ocean temperatures. The narrator's voice mixes with the heat clicking on in my ancient radiator, creating a soundtrack of domestic comfort that makes this conversation feel both intimate and surreal. I tell him that Marcus probably read that in a book somewhere, that philosophy majors have a tendency to present borrowed wisdom as personal revelation. Damien laughs, but it's distracted, like his attention is elsewhere. He sits up then, shifting so he's facing me more directly, and something in his expression makes my pulse quicken. There's a vulnerability in his face that I've only seen a few times before, usually when he's talking about his father or his anxiety about graduation, or the way he sometimes feels like he's disappointing everyone just by being himself. "Can I ask you something?" he says, and it's not really a question so much as a warning that he's about to cross into territory we usually avoid. I nod because what else can I do? My throat feels tight with anticipation and fear in equal measure. He takes a long drink from his beer, buying time, and when he speaks again, his voice is carefully controlled. "You've never wondered what it would be like? With someone you trust?" The question hangs in the air between us, loaded with implication and possibility. I can feel my heart hammering against my ribs, so loud I'm certain he must be able to hear it. The documentary continues its gentle narration about dying ecosystems, completely oblivious to the way the world has suddenly tilted on its axis. I want to ask him what he means, but I already know. The same way I know that this moment has been building for months, maybe years, in every lingering touch and shared glance and night spent pressed together on this same couch. He's asking about us, about crossing the line we've been dancing around since that first day he sat next to me in lecture. I laugh, but it comes out nervous and strangled, betraying everything I'm trying to hide. The sound seems to give him permission to continue. He says, looking away again, his thumb tracing patterns on the beer label, just casual. "No one has to know. It's just curiosity, right? About what it would feel like with someone who actually gets you. Casual." The same word he used last night when his face was pressed against my neck, when the space between us felt charged with electricity and longing. He's wrapping his invitation in the safety of hypotheticals, disguising it as intellectual curiosity rather than desire. But I can hear the truth underneath his careful words, can see it in the way his hands shake slightly as he picks at the beer label. This isn't just philosophical wondering. This is Damien asking for something real, something that scares him enough that he needs to build escape routes into the question itself. The silence stretches between us, filled with the weight of everything we've never said. I should probably laugh it off, make some joke about how much beer he's had, or suggest we focus on studying. I should preserve the friendship we've built by pretending this moment isn't happening. Instead, I find myself studying his face, looking for clues about what he really wants to hear. His jaw is tight with tension, and there's something desperate in the way he's not quite meeting my eyes, like he's terrified of what he might find there. The documentary ends with some hopeful message about conservation efforts and human resilience, but neither of us is paying attention anymore. We're caught in this moment, this question that feels like standing at the edge of a cliff, uncertain whether we're about to fly or fall. When I finally speak, my voice comes out steadier than I expected. "What exactly are you asking me?" He looks at me, then really looks, and in his eyes I see everything he can't bring himself to say out loud. The answer I give him, that night changes everything, though neither of us acknowledges it at first. I tell him that trust matters more than labels, that curiosity isn't something to be ashamed of, that some questions can only be answered through experience rather than theory. The words feel simultaneously too much and not enough, dancing around the truth we're both afraid to name. We don't cross any obvious lines that evening. We finish our beers, make awkward small talk about our upcoming exams, and eventually Damien gathers his textbooks with the same casual efficiency he always does. But when he hugs me goodbye at the door, his arms linger around my shoulders a moment longer than usual, and his breath against my ear carries words I almost convince myself I imagine. "Thank you," he whispers, so quietly I feel it more than hear it. From that night forward, our friendship shifts into something I don't have words for. The change is subtle at first, manifesting in small alterations to patterns we've established over years of knowing each other. Damien starts texting me more frequently, sending random observations about his day or links to articles he thinks I might find interesting. The messages arrive at odd hours, during his lunch break or late at night when he should be sleeping, as if I've become a constant presence in his thoughts. He begins showing up at my apartment without calling first, something he's never done before. I'll hear his familiar knock while I'm making dinner or folding laundry, and when I open the door, he'll be standing there with some transparent excuse about being in the neighborhood or needing to borrow my statistics notes. But his eyes carry a nervousness that betrays the casual nature of these visits, and he always stays longer than necessary. Our study sessions take on a different quality too, where we used to spread out across my living room, claiming separate territories marked by stacks of books and scattered papers. Now we gravitate toward the same small space. The couch becomes our shared workspace, our bodies finding excuses to occupy the same cushions, even when there's plenty of room elsewhere. I notice how Damien's leg presses against mine while we read, how his hand sometimes brushes my arm when he reaches for his highlighter. These touches feel different now, weighted with the conversation we had and all the implications neither of us has been brave enough to explore. Each point of contact sends electricity through my nervous system, a constant low-level awareness of his proximity that makes concentration nearly impossible. The first time he falls asleep in my bed, it happens almost by accident. We've been studying for our respective midterms until nearly 3 a.m, sprawled across my mattress with textbooks and laptops, creating a barrier between us that feels both protective and frustrating. When exhaustion finally wins, Damien simply lets his head drop to my pillow instead of gathering his things to leave. I lie awake for hours that first night, hyper-aware of every sound he makes, every shift in his breathing, every unconscious movement that brings him closer to my side of the bed. In sleep, he's unguarded in a way that makes my chest ache with tenderness and longing. His face relaxes into something younger and more vulnerable, and I find myself memorizing the curve of his jaw, the way his dark hair falls across his forehead. When morning comes, we wake up tangled together in a way that should be awkward, but somehow isn't. Damien's arm is draped across my chest, his face pressed into the hollow of my shoulder, and for a few perfect moments before consciousness fully returns, it feels like the most natural thing in the world. He pulls away when he realizes our position, making some joke about my mattress being more comfortable than his, but there's color high in his cheeks that wasn't there the night before. We don't talk about it directly, but something fundamental has shifted between us. After that, it becomes routine. Damien stays later and later, until eventually he's spending more nights in my apartment than in his own dorm room. Marcus stops asking where his roommate disappears to every evening, and I stop making excuses for why Damien's textbooks are permanently scattered across my coffee table. The physical intimacy between us grows gradually, each boundary crossed so naturally that we never have to discuss what's happening. His head finds my lap while we watch movies. My fingers card through his hair while he dozes during documentary marathons. We fall asleep pressed together on my narrow bed, our bodies unconsciously seeking each other's warmth throughout the night. But it's the emotional intimacy that undoes me completely. Damien starts sharing parts of himself he's never shown anyone, talking about his fears and doubts with a vulnerability that takes my breath away. He tells me about the pressure he feels to live up to his father's expectations, about his anxiety surrounding graduation and the uncertainty of his future. He admits that sometimes he feels like he's performing his own life rather than living it, echoing that conversation about Marcus and self-knowledge that started everything. In return, I find myself opening up in ways I never have before. I tell him about feeling different as a child, about the loneliness that comes with being the observer rather than the participant. I share my own fears about the future, about whether the careful, quiet life I've built for myself is actually what I want or just what feels safe. These conversations happen in the dark, Usually, our voice is soft and careful in the space between sleep and waking. There's something about the cover of darkness that makes honesty feel possible, that strips away the defenses we maintain during daylight hours. Neither of us mentions the word casual anymore, though it hangs unspoken between us like a promise we're both afraid to break. The revelation comes on a night when winter has settled over the city like a heavy blanket, turning the world outside my apartment into something stark and beautiful. Snow falls in thick, lazy flakes past my bedroom window, muffling the usual sounds of traffic and late-night conversations from the street below. The heating in my building has been struggling all week, leaving us huddled under layers of blankets that smell like fabric softener and the faint cologne that clings to everything Damien touches. We've been lying in my bed for hours, not quite sleeping, but not fully awake either, existing in that liminal space where honesty feels safer because it can always be blamed on exhaustion later. Damien's body is pressed along the length of mine, his chest against my back, his arm wrapped around my waist like an anchor. This position has become familiar over the past few weeks, natural in a way that should terrify me, but instead feels like coming home. His breathing is deep and even against my neck, and I've almost convinced myself he's asleep when his voice cuts through the quiet darkness. "I keep thinking about what you said," he whispers, his words barely audible above the sound of snow against glass and the distant hum of the radiator struggling to life. I don't need to ask what he means. Ever since that night when he asked about trust and curiosity, our conversations have circled back to questions of identity and authenticity, about the difference between who we are and who we think we're supposed to be. But there's something different in his voice tonight, something raw and uncertain that makes my stomach clench with nervous anticipation. About performing your life instead of living it, I say quietly, not trusting myself to turn and face him. His arm tightens around me slightly, and I feel him nod against my shoulder. "Yeah, that." The silence that follows is heavy with meaning, filled with all the things we've been carefully not saying for weeks. Outside, the snow continues its steady descent, transforming the familiar landscape into something new and unrecognizable. Inside, we're wrapped in warmth and darkness, and the kind of intimacy that makes everything else feel distant and irrelevant. "I've been thinking about a lot," Damien continues, his voice so quiet I have to strain to hear him. "About how I've spent so much time being what everyone expected that I don't know what I actually want anymore." The confession hangs between us like a question, and I can feel the tension in his body, the way his muscles are coiled with nervous energy despite the late hour. This is uncharted territory for both of us, a conversation we've been building toward for months without acknowledging it. "What do you think you want?" I ask, though part of me is terrified of the answer. He's quiet for so long that I begin to think he's fallen asleep, that the moment has passed, and we'll wake up tomorrow pretending this conversation never happened. But then his hand moves, fingers tracing abstract patterns on my chest through my shirt, and when he speaks again, his voice carries a vulnerability that makes my heart race. "I think I want to stop pretending," he says, and the words feel like a confession and a prayer and a terrifying leap of faith all at once. I turn his arms then, needing to see his face, needing to understand what he's really saying. In the dim light filtering through my curtains, his eyes are wide and uncertain, reflecting back my own fear and hope in equal measure. This close, I can see the way his jaw is tight with tension, the way his breathing is carefully controlled like he's fighting to stay calm. The space between us feels charged with possibility and danger. We've crossed so many small boundaries over the past few weeks that this moment feels both inevitable and shocking, like standing at the edge of a precipice we've been walking toward without realizing it. "This doesn't feel casual," I whisper, the words escaping before I can stop them. The admission sits heavy in the air between us, naming the thing we've both been avoiding. Damien's eyes widen slightly, and for a moment, I think he's going to pull away, retreat behind the safe walls of denial and friendship that have protected us both from having to face what this has become. Instead, his body goes very still against mine, and I can feel the moment stretch between us like a held breath. His hand, which had been tracing gentle patterns on my chest, stops moving entirely, palm flat against my ribs, where he must be able to feel the rapid beating of my heart. "I know," he says finally, his voice barely more than an exhale. That's what scares me. The confession breaks something open between us, a dam of pretense and careful boundaries that we've been building higher and higher with each passing day. In those 3 words, Damien admits what we've both known but been too afraid to acknowledge. That this stopped being casual the moment it began, that we've been lying to ourselves about the nature of what's growing between us. His admission gives me permission to speak my own truth, to voice the fears and hopes I've been carrying alone for so long. I've been scared too, I tell him, my voice matching his whisper. Scared that if I said anything, if I pushed for more, I'd lose you entirely. He makes a sound then, something between a laugh and a sigh, and his free hand comes up to trace the line of my jaw with fingers that shake slightly despite his efforts to appear calm. "You're not going to lose me," he says, and the certainty in his voice surprises us both. That's the only thing I'm sure about right now. Everything else feels impossible to figure out, but that I know. The words settle between us like a promise, fragile and precious and terrifying in their honesty. We lie there in the darkness, faces inches apart, breathing the same air and trying to navigate this new landscape we've stumbled into together. The morning after our confession arrives gray and uncertain, filtered through clouds that make the world outside look washed out and fragile. I wake to find Damien already sitting on the edge of my bed, fully dressed, his back rigid with tension that wasn't there in the darkness hours before. The sight sends ice through my veins, a familiar dread that tells me he's retreating before I'm even fully conscious. He doesn't look at me when I sit up, doesn't acknowledge the soft sound I make as I try to shake off sleep and understand what's changed between the vulnerable honesty of last night and this cold morning distance. Instead, he stares out my window at nothing in particular, his hands clasped tightly in his lap like he's trying to hold himself together through sheer force of will. "I should probably go," he says, his voice carefully neutral in a way that makes my chest tighten with panic. The words hit me like cold water, washing away the warmth and safety I'd felt wrapped in his arms just hours before. This is Damien's pattern, I realize with sickening clarity. He gets close, lets down his guard, shows me pieces of himself that feel real and precious, and then retreats the moment things become too intense to ignore. But this time feels different. This time, there's something desperate in his withdrawal, something that suggests he's not just scared of what we've become, but terrified of losing it. The careful control in his voice sounds like someone trying to convince himself as much as me, and I can see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands shake slightly despite his attempts to appear calm. I don't respond immediately, because I've learned to read the subtext in Damien's retreats. He's not asking to leave because he wants to. He's asking because he thinks he should, because staying means acknowledging what happened between us, and acknowledgement means having to figure out what it all means in the harsh light of day. Instead of agreeing or arguing, I move closer, settling beside him on the bed where I can see his profile, the tight line of his jaw, and the way he's deliberately avoiding my gaze. This close, I can smell his cologne mixed with something else, something more essentially him that I've grown to associate with safety and comfort and the kind of intimacy I never thought I'd be allowed to have. "What are you really afraid of?" I ask quietly, and the question hangs between us like a challenge. He turns to look at me then, and the expression on his face is raw with conflict. There's longing there, mixed with fear and confusion and something that looks almost like grief. As if he's mourning something we haven't even lost yet, something he's convinced himself we can never actually have. "This is insane," he says, but his voice lacks conviction. Sounds more like he's trying to talk himself out of something than stating a fact. We can't just. People don't just decide to change everything about who they are. But that's not what this is it? I tell him, moving close enough that our knees touch, that I can see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. You're not changing who you are. You're just finally admitting what's already been true. The words seem to hit him like a physical blow, and I watch him flinch away from their implication. But he doesn't move away from me physically, doesn't put distance between our bodies, even as his mind races through all the reasons this is impossible. My family, he says finally, the words coming out broken and desperate. My friends, everyone who knows me, they're going to think. I cut him off before he can finish the thought, before he can list all the ways this revelation might disappoint or confuse the people in his life. What are they going to think, Damien? That you care about me? That you found something real with someone who actually knows you? He's quiet for a long moment, staring down at his hands, and I can see him wrestling with everything I've said. This is the moment I realize. This is where he either chooses the safety of denial or the terrifying uncertainty of truth. When he finally speaks, his voice is so quiet, I have to lean closer to hear him. I don't want to lose this, he admits. I don't want to lose you. But I don't know how to be this person everyone's going to see when they look at us. The confession breaks my heart and mends it simultaneously because it tells me everything I need to know about where he stands. He's not running because he doesn't want this. He's running because he wants it so badly he can't imagine a world where he gets to keep it. Then stop running, I tell him, reaching for his hand and threading our fingers together. Stop worrying about who everyone else thinks you're supposed to be and just be who you actually are. Here, with me, where it's safe to figure it out. He looks down on our joined hands like they might hold answers to questions he's been afraid to ask, and I can see something shift in his expression. The fear doesn't disappear, but it transforms into something else, something that looks like courage mixed with desperate hope. Then stop coming here. I continue, my voice stronger now, pushing him toward the choice I can see him wrestling with. Stop staying. Stop holding me like you don't want to let go if it doesn't mean anything. Stop pretending this is casual when we both know it stopped being casual the first night you fell asleep in my arms. The silence that follows is loaded with possibility and terror in equal measure. I can hear the sound of my own heartbeat, the distant noise of the city waking up outside, the careful rhythm of Damien's breathing as he processes everything I've said. When he finally responds, it's not with words but with action. He turns toward me fully, his free hand coming up to cup my face with a tenderness that takes my breath away. His thumb traces the line of my cheekbone, and his eyes hold mine with an intensity that feels like a promise. I don't want to stop, he whispers, his voice shaking with emotion and resolution and the kind of raw honesty that only comes from standing at the edge of everything you've ever known. I don't want to pretend anymore. Morning light filters through my bedroom curtains in soft, golden streams, painting everything in shades of amber and possibility. The storm from last night has passed, leaving behind a world that looks clean and new, as if the snow has washed away more than just the dust and grime of the city. Outside, I can hear the distant sounds of life returning to normal after the weather. Cars navigating carefully over wet pavement, voices calling to each other across the courtyard, the steady drip of melting ice from the fire escape. But inside this room, time feels suspended, held in the space between Damien's whispered confession and whatever comes next. He hasn't moved away from me since he said he doesn't want to pretend anymore. If anything, he's drawn closer, his body curved toward mine like a flower turning toward sunlight, his hands still cupping my face with a gentleness that makes my chest ache with tenderness. We haven't spoken since his admission, haven't tried to define what this moment means or plan what happens when we leave this bed and return to the world outside. Instead, we've simply existed here, breathing the same air, sharing the same space, letting the weight of honesty settle between us like something precious and fragile. I can see exhaustion in the lines around his eyes, the kind that comes not from lack of sleep, but from carrying secrets that are too heavy to bear alone. There's also something else there, something that looks like relief mixed with terror, as if he's simultaneously grateful to have spoken his truth and overwhelmed by the implications of what he's revealed. The choice he made last night, the decision to stay instead of running, to speak instead of retreating into familiar patterns of denial. It's changed something fundamental between us, not just in how we relate to each other, but in how we understand ourselves, how we navigate the space between who we thought we were and who we're discovering we might actually be. His thumb traces lazy circles on my cheek, and I find myself memorizing the feeling, The way his touch sends warmth spiraling through my nervous system. This is intimacy without pretense, affection without the careful boundaries we've maintained for so long. This is what it feels like when the walls come down completely. I should be terrified. We both should be. We've crossed every line we promised ourselves we wouldn't cross, abandoned every safety net we've carefully constructed over the years of our friendship. There's no going back to casual touches and plausible deniability, no returning to the comfortable fiction that this is just friendship with convenient physical proximity. Instead, I feel something that resembles peace, if peace can coexist with the kind of anticipation that makes your skin feel too tight and your heart beat too fast. This is what I've wanted without letting myself want it, what I've hoped for without daring to hope. Damien, without walls, without performance, without the careful mask he wears for everyone else. You're thinking too loud, he murmurs, his voice rough with sleep and emotion, and I realize I've been staring at him with an intensity that probably borders on alarming. I'm thinking about how different you look when you're not performing. I tell him honestly, because we've moved past the point where small talk and deflection serve any useful purpose. He considers this for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Different how? Like yourself? I say simply. Like the person you are when no one else is watching. The words seem to settle something in him, and I watch as the last traces of tension leave his shoulders. He shifts closer, eliminating what little space remained between our bodies, and when he settles against me, it's with the kind of complete trust that takes my breath away. His head finds its familiar place against my neck, his face pressed into the hollow of my throat where my pulse beats steady and sure. His arm wraps around my waist, pulling me closer, and his legs tangle with mine beneath the covers we've somehow managed to keep pulled up around us despite all our shifting and repositioning. This is how we fit together, I realize. Not carefully, not with conscious thought about boundaries and implications, but naturally, like we were designed for exactly this configuration. His breath is warm against my skin, and I can feel the way his body relaxes completely against mine, surrendering to the comfort and safety we've created in this small space. I think about the word casual and how laughable it seems now, how inadequate it was for describing something that has always felt essential, necessary, like breathing or heartbeat. There is never anything casual about the way Damien looks at me when he thinks I'm not paying attention, nothing casual about the way he gravitates toward my side of any room, nothing casual about the way he holds me now, like he's afraid I might disappear if he loosens his grip. The morning continues to unfold outside my window, the city waking up and moving forward with the steady rhythm of ordinary life. People are probably getting dressed for work, making coffee, checking their phones for messages and updates from the wider world. Normal life, proceeding as it always has, completely unaware that something fundamental has shifted in the space between my sheets. But here, in this room, time moves differently. Here, we exist outside the normal rules and expectations, creating our own small universe where honesty is possible and pretense has been abandoned entirely. Damien's breathing has deepened into the steady rhythm of sleep, and I can feel the complete trust in the way he surrendered consciousness while pressed against me. His hand is still fisted in my shirt, holding on even in sleep as if he's determined not to let me slip away. The gesture is unconscious but telling, a physical manifestation of everything he couldn't say out loud for so long. I close my eyes and let myself sink into this moment, this perfect suspension between what was and what might be. Tomorrow will bring questions and complications, conversations about what this means and how we move forward. But right now, there's only this, two bodies tangled together on a couch too small for them both, a friendship redefined in the silence of dawn, casual in words but everything but in truth.